why should you read the Ender Saga by Orson Scott Card? I'm talking about a tetralogy of sci-fi books which are part of a wider universe. I'm just talking about the core 4 books about Ender. They start with Ender's Game, it continues with Speaker for the Dead, then Xenocide, and then finally Children of the Mind. I don't actually have books 2 and 3, I borrowed them when I read them. And yeah, there are other books in this universe, the Ender's Shadow books particularly, most notably, and I think there's some short stories and novellas as well in the universe. But yeah, Scott Card also writes fantasy and other non-connected sci-fi. His most famous work is, well, Ender's Game, which has seen a movie adaptation, but also arguably in book terms, the sequel, Speaker for the Dead. They both won the Hugo. The third book, Xenocide, was nominated. So why should you read it? I'll give, I think, 3 reasons. It's easy to kind of go into all kinds of I liked this or this was good about books you like, but I think just 3 big categories. One is the variety, and particularly I mean the variety between the first book, Ender's Game, and the second and third books, Speaker for the Dead and Xenocide, which are all great books. Arguably Xenocide is as good as Speaker for the Dead, if not better. It depends on who you ask, but I certainly liked it a lot. And a big thing was that he wanted to write Speaker for the Dead, which is about this idea that in the future, when people die, at their funerals, many of them will have, even if you're also got a religious funeral or something else, but in many cases people will have someone come and speak for the dead person, and it'll be an honest recounting of their strengths and weaknesses in an attempt to reckon with their legacy. And he had this idea, and he had this idea about plots and stuff that was going on in Speaker for the Dead. But he realised, or he felt like he had to write a book first that introduced this character, Ender, Andrew Wiggin, aka Ender, who, his 2 siblings, Peter and Valentine, also very important in the story of the universe. And Ender's Game, then, is a Bildungsroman school, military, space school novel where, to stop a great threat to Earth, children are recruited to battle school to find those who can defeat the alien menace, and they train intensively, in both physical combat and in computer-based learning, things like that. And so you've got this really remarkable story of an unlikely hero arc, classic kid becoming unlikely hero, and forming a team and learning about the universe, and then trying to deal with the ramifications of what's happened, with a few very famous moments in sci-fi history. Then the second and the third books are these very different, quite ruminative, world-building exploratory novels about people in their middle age. Chiefly the heroes are people in their middle age, who are led by this young Ender, who is now a Speaker for the Dead, and which just have a completely different feel. So one thing is, if you read these books, you're not reading 4 books which it's a great tetralogy, it's all one big story and there's this particular tone and theme. Actually, Card is very good at switching tone and theme. There is also a change, it has to be said, to Children of the Mind. When you move into Children of the Mind, there is a tonal change. Children of the Mind is still good, I enjoyed it, but it's less successful than the other 3, so hence why I initially contrast number 1 and numbers 2 and 3. Number 4 also has a tonal shift into a slightly more fraught and dramatic tone. I think A Planet Lies Open to Attack, there is still light, hope, but time is running out. It's a different feel again, and quite different to this in terms of the way the action adventure sort of plays out. Very, very different. The second thing I want to say, you'll like these books if you like, is that Card is incredibly inventive. He is a great speculative writer. His fantasy, I'm thinking about his Alvin Maker books, are similar in this, that he comes up with this alternative America that is, in fairly short books comparatively, very often quickly accomplished, luxuriant in the alternate history and detail he puts into it. And here, what you have is, because a big thing here is that there are mysteries you're working out. I guess a few mystery and the world building and the alien creation, the world creation is all set up in that. is, I don't want to spoil that. So I think I'll give some very rough examples. So for instance, what happens when you've got an enemy no one's met, but except those I guess they've killed. This exceptionally dangerous enemy who is inhuman. It's a social insect, the Formics, in the Formics in the first book. And how do you deal with this sort of intentionally? So it's not just like, oh, there's a distant alien menace. That doesn't matter, just get on with it. Have a story, have a plot. But where actually the anxiety around this unknown, known, and known unknown, with slips of information, bits and pieces coming out through the story, and just realizing how much is not understood, how much, how much of a danger that is to humanity. And then in books 2 and 3, which are very much connected plot-wise, book 4 is connected to books 2 and 3 plot-wise, but I think books 2 and 3, though independent, do breathe together like two lungs. They are very much kind of an extended discussion of some of the same things. And the big mystery there is, on this alien world, there's this poorly understood species called the Piggies, nicknamed the Piggies, and they have some sort of symbiotic relationship. These piggies, they're little, they don't look like pigs, but quasi-pig-like humanoids running around, who the colonists have tension and clashes with. Some people want to try to understand, and they have obviously weird, confusing religion. They've got this weird, seemingly symbiotic relationship with these trees, special kind of tree. It's not clear how all of this interacts in the biosphere with everything else on the world. And there's lots of other weird kind of animals and stuff that you're trying to work out how all these things connect, and how to talk to this hostile or friendly, who knows, kind of alien species the Piggies on this world is. So yeah, that's I think that's a real strength of Card, that he is able to come up with really compelling sci-fi ideas and mysteries that you want to find out. So, because that keeps you reading, doesn't it? It's not, you could read a summary online, but the discovery is the joy of it. Finally, he is very strong with characters. I think this can be neglected when talking about Card, because you end up saying, oh, remember that mystery being solved, or remember that idea he had, or that twist. And I think basically the point is that he has a few characters through the stories who are, well, even if they don't necessarily have lots of time on stage, very well drawn and very clear and very compelling. Ender is the most obvious one. He's your hero here as a kid, and then he is your hero later as a middle-aged man. But his siblings, Peter and Valentine, in different ways, very effective, powerful, different characters. And other characters too. Certainly, some of the alien characters, like the Piggies, are really interesting as you get to know a bit more about them. And some of the other human characters in those second and third novels, there is in the fourth novel, Wang Mu, I think it is yes, is that the young lady in book 4? She's an interesting secondary character who becomes important, and then in the second and third books, particularly, there's a character called King, who is one of my favourite characters, and I think has just some of the most interesting, important moments and arc over those books. So he draws compelling characters, and with some of them, with the new lead character, like the new member of the main cast in book 4, and with King and with Ender, you have also arcs in development that are you want to see what pans out, and you care about what pans out. And then, of course, that's interacting with this other stuff, particularly with the sci-fi mysteries, the speculative stuff about what's going on in this world. How do we deal with this threat or problem? The two are combining, and the characters are overlapping and discovering themselves, and we discover the character through discovering the mystery. So those are, I think, the three things I'd say about the first Ender tetralogy, which would make me recommend them to you. I haven't read the Shadow Saga. It comes highly recommended. I would like to read it. There's intermittent. Card has had a very odd production schedule in the last decade or so, I think. There's intermittent, I think, rumour about more Ender books. Maybe I've missed a release even, but like of more stuff following on the main plot. But yes, I would certainly recommend the first 4. If you've read them, tell me what you think in the comments, and tell me about other card books that you like or dislike, and why. Till next time.